great. And I encourage folks who are joining us to continue putting their check-ins in the chat. I have to do a little housekeeping. Sorry, it's just I gotta do it. NNPN's 2024 National Showcase of New Plays registration is open. We would like to see all of you in April. Liana's going to drop some details in the chat. We are in the final throes of picking our plays and can't wait to tell you what they are. You aren't going to want to miss it. Register now. And the other link we want to put in the chat, always, NNPN's member theater link tree. This is your one-stop shop for all things NNPN. It is where you can find that registration link. It's also where you can find the Zoom link to conversations like this. Any sort of, if you're like, I want to apply for this program, how do I do that? It's on there, et cetera, et cetera. Bookmark that link tree. That's how, the best way to stay up to speed with our stuff. Okay, but that's enough. That's all our housekeeping. I'm done, I promise. I'm so excited for this conversation. The last several years have brought tremendous changes to NNPN's member theater and to the American theater landscape at large. And one of those changes has been leadership transitions. And so I'm delighted that today we have Jada Dixon, Lance Gardner, and Mark Valdez to tell us a little bit about their transitions into their leadership roles. We're going to put their bios in the chat because they are all very esteemed and acclaimed artists and arts leaders, and reading them would take up much of our time. So I want to just kick things off, and I'll invite whichever one of the three of you wants to grab the ball first. If you can just tell us a little bit about how you found your way into this role and just sort of a little overview of the transition.
I'll start. I spent the majority of my early career as an actor, and I was lucky in that I found a great deal of work here in the San Francisco Bay Area. But as a parent, and as I think a natural or aspirational leader, I was frustrated with the opportunities that I was being afforded, acting primarily in the theater, both financially and in terms of agency. So I left that. I found the world of journalism, podcasting through an excellent program that was hosted here in the Bay Area by KLW, a local public radio station, which landed me then at KQED, an NPR and PBS affiliate, where I was producing live events, and had written off the theater essentially. But when this position opened up at a theater where I earned my equity card in the very first place, I felt that it was important to revisit my love of theater and my desire to lead, and found myself applying and getting this position, which has been a real surprise and a real challenge.
I'll jump in here. Thanks, Lance. Hi, everybody. Jada Dixon at Curious Theater Company, located in the Golden Triangle neighborhood. We're about 15 minutes from downtown Denver in a very rapidly growing neighborhood. We occupy a very old building that was built in the 1890s. So I have been an artistic company member here at Curious for 10 plus years and was approached by the previous leadership seeking out my opinion about leading an arts organization. And truth be told, when the question was asked, my first response was to laugh out loud, which I did, and was like, I don't think that's for me. as an artist in town. I was able to sort of build my own branding, both as an actor and a director, and it was important that I maintain that. And for some reason, I thought that that would interfere. Alongside that work, I'd also been working in corporate for 17 plus years. And so as I sat back and thought about it, I thought, oh, everything that I've done has certainly set the stage for me to step into this role. So I said yes, with the understanding that we were going to have a very strategic transition year first, which meant that the previous leadership would stay on sort of as an executive consultant as we embarked upon the year. And at the end of the year, they would fully move on to the next endeavor of their life. So I am actually in my first season on my own as the artistic director here. Mark.
Hi, y'all. Mark Valdez. Um, similar stories. Interestingly, I've actually spent most of my career in I spent my career in theater, and a lot of it in nonprofit. I've grew up in Texas and then moved to California, and I started out with a theater there called Cornerstone Theater Company, and I was the associate artistic director there, an ensemble member for many years before kind of leaving to try my luck as a freelancer, and then ended up running an organization called the Network of Ensemble Theaters. It's a coalition of ensembles from across the country, and a lot of that was, was the founding executive director of that network, and so did that for several years before, again, just feeling like I just need to go make art. And a lot of it was just like I felt like my identity was kind of very much becoming that of an administrator, and kind of running a network, and just wanted to exert kind of the art maker part. And so was freelancing for kind of 6-7 years. And then all the while I was directing here at Mixed Blood. I have a 15-year relationship with the company, did some stints here as an artist in residence, and then this opportunity came up, and the board kind of was very kind and reached out and encouraging to apply. And I will say, I didn't think I wanted, like my colleagues, I didn't think I wanted the job. And I was at a funeral for Diane Rodriguez. If you don't know Diane Rodriguez, she was at the Center Theater Group, amazing director, amazing writer, wonderful, just a brilliant actor. And she had passed away, and there was a memorial service for her. And it was a who's who of Latino theater. People from all across the country were in this one room. And I looked around, and I could, like there was like, I could count on one hand and have some fingers to spare of Latinos who were running theater companies. And then this quote, like Diane, there was like a video thing of Diane saying, "It is our responsibility to assume these jobs of responsibilities, to run organizations, and to make opportunities for all of those who are going to follow us." And that was the moment. I was like, okay, I gotta do this. I'm in it, and here we are.
That's great. You all kind of gave context in terms of the professional backgrounds that you're bringing into this new role for all of you. And I was wondering, Anne and I were wondering how the circumstances of this actual world that we're all living in regard to public health, economics, politics, etc., shape your current transition from your past professions to this leadership role.
Sorry, Leanna, I was pausing because I'm like, wow, that's a really big, juicy question and how to answer. So I will try. I will say, and as I'm sure everyone on this call, like we are still feeling the after effects of the pandemic. So, we are very challenged right now financially as we see a decline in our subscription model, a decline in our individual and major donors. And as an organization, we didn't necessarily do a great job during pandemic of maintaining some of those relationships and continuing to cultivate them. So we sort of find ourselves now a little bit at the bottom of the hill. I'm going to call it a hill and not a mountain, as we sort of reinvigorate some of those relationships and those connections, and allowing people to, sort of see the organization in a different way. I think part of the challenge might have been because the previous leadership had been here as not only the producing artistic director, but also a co-founder. That leader became very synonymous with the organization, and the organization became very synonymous with them. And so one of my intents coming in was to say, we've got to get back to an organization centered focus. It isn't about one individual person or persons. And that's been a little challenging to try to separate. I also feel a responsibility, a very strong pressure, probably a lot of it just coming from me personally. I am a recovering perfectionist and not doing well at my recovery. So, I'm the first Black female leading this arts organization in its 25-year history. And, there's a lot of, there were a lot of questions that folks were looking at. Is this theater now going to become, a Black centered organization? Is all your programming going to become, blah, blah, blah? And, you sort of just like, really? That's the question you asked? Okay. So, I've also sort of had to push for people to understand we will continue to stay a mission centered organization, and how we live that mission out as it relates to the times that we find ourselves in. So I think that's the connection I see, Leanna, that we are, as artists, we're always deeply connected to the world that surround us. And as an organization, I think we're trying to ensure we continue to live out our mission while also being relevant to the times we find ourselves in. Whether that means we just want to hold up a mirror to folks, challenge folks, which is also a really hard balance when you're also trying to get butts in seats.
I would piggyback on that and say ditto, yes, +1. I mean, I think Jada, yes, like it's you start with the mission, and then how does that mission respond to the times, and I think I think embedded in the question is also like what is our purpose? What is the function of theater now? And I think that is a question that I certainly spend a lot of time thinking about. Was like things that I care about is like how can we be useful to our communities? What is the value of the work beyond the product that we produce, beyond the play? If what is the significance? What is the use? How are we contributing to our community beyond just this thing, which is not a small thing? Like it's a lot. I don't mean to like dismiss it at all, but I do think that I'm really interested in just articulating all the other ways that we are useful and pointing that out so that we can strengthen relationships and partnerships, and all because the context of our times where we're fractured, where like there's climate catastrophe on our doorsteps, where I'm in Minneapolis, not far from where George Floyd was killed. It is like there's real community context that this work has to happen in. And so I think to Jada's point is like that's where the rubber meets the road.
For me, I see challenges in how to approach an audience that has that seems to have evolving tastes and desires. And I think from the pandemic itself changed the way that people consumed things and interacted with the world. And the the political struggles that America has been facing, I'll say forever, but the recent ones have also changed people's appetites. there's a real, I hear a rumble of I need levity. I need, I don't want to be confronting these things. But then I also, as a person who recognizes a need for change and engagement, I also want to confront people with these things. And so I struggle with, like Mark said, the role of theater in the community, and how and whether to engage people in certain ways, and whether the education and the art and the activism and the entertainment can all be married, or if those things have to stay separate. And then again, because of all the conflicting, and I don't know about conflicting, but just the varied the varied needs of a society, it's hard to convince people to invest in theater when you don't have that clear impact on community that they can see, when there are people without housing, and people without food, and oppression, and all these things that you can donate directly to try to solve. Why donate to a theater if it's not impacting the community? So I'm working in my head and on paper and with other people to figure out how and if we can have a positive impact on community, and whether or not that's going to bring people through the doors, because I also see a need to be a steward of the art and artists and administrators and people who work for and with us. And an important part of keeping our doors open is keeping people employed and engaged in what they would like to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, already I'm hearing from the three of you just sort of all of the sort of conflicting, or not conflicting, but all the various forces at play as you step into these roles. I want to sort of move. This is a question that is bubbling. I hadn't prepared, but it's bubbling up for me based on listening to y'all speak. That's a little bit in draft. But I'm curious about, Jada and Mark you're both stepping in after a long time founding artistic director, and Lance, your predecessor was not the founder, but was there for quite a long time as well. And so this idea of having to sort of tease out for artists, audiences, donor staff, the identity of the organization as separate from the identity of the organization, while also you are all artists in your own right, and you have your own visions and tastes and ways of making art. And then, as we've just heard, audiences' tastes are changing as well. So how are you thinking about balancing or marrying or navigating your personal aesthetic, the organization's mission and history, and the needs and desires of your audience?
I think the first part of that, oh, sorry, Lance, is accepting that all these, ideas that were in my head that I think are grand, but who knows if they are or not, right? Like, oh, I'm so excited to make these changes, and sort of having to give myself acceptance and permission to realize those changes can't happen overnight. Folks weren't ready for some of those ideas and shifts and changes. So I've sort of had to slowly introduce, an idea here where I thought, oh, this one's going to feel a little easier to digest for folks, and I can share sort of the reason why behind it and how it connects to our mission. So trying to find those smaller items to institute that I think feel a little safer to people. Folks weren't ready for me to, come in and start flipping tables, which is really what I wanted to do, in a nice way. And that's okay. So I've also had to say that's okay. Change will happen and change will occur. It just is going to have to go at a little slower pace than we might have imagined. And also, as I shared, how do we, what's within my control in terms of separating the entity from that previous leadership? And again, not in a negative way, but to say like this organization can still be who it is at its core. And it's going to look a little different. And I think the challenge I'm finding is how do I bring our donors, our patrons along the path of that, and that's just going a little slower than I had imagined. I will. Can I just add one comment based on what Lance had shared? Maybe about 6 months ago when there was tons of news out there, and I don't know about you all, but I was getting very disheartened, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said yes to this. This is scary and I don't have all the answers. And like, what? You want us to program, no disrespect to Christmas Carol, but you want me to program Christmas Carol? Like, I'm not going to do that. We don't do that. That's not who we are. And I was feeling very disheartened, and we did a quick, like, let's go back over the last 3 years and what were our best-selling shows? And what are some of the comments that we have on those best-selling shows? And our best-selling shows were shows that were dealing with really hard issues: police brutality, white supremacy. And I was like, okay, so we don't have to worry about the fully entertaining. Our folks, I think, want a way in to explore our humanity collectively, and then to be able to dissect it and talk about it. And our data showed us that that's what that was wanted. So I felt a little bit more ease in terms of not having to be forced to program Christmas Carol. No disrespect to anybody who does.
I'll disrespect a Christmas Carol. I don't have a problem with that. But I also have respect for earned revenue. I think data is a great word for approaching this idea. If you can look at what has worked, there's no shame in programming toward that, right? If you see how audiences have responded to certain things, then you can make educated choices, and that's only a portion. It only has to be a portion of what you're doing. Something that I learned, when I was at KQED, we were programming 60 one-off events per year, so it was a constant stream of all different kinds of things, and there was not room to only do what I thought was great. Right? There had to be ideas from elsewhere, and something that I learned was that there are worlds. I mean, I knew this, but there are worlds out there that I know nothing about, that I maybe actively dislike but are not harmful, that other people love, and my job is to bring things to people, not to necessarily bring only my things to people. So there's space for my aesthetic and my desire to share what I think people ought to know, but there's also space for the things that I have yet to learn, and I can be growing and learning through the work that I'm curating with the help of other people. And I think that theater is always better when it's representative of many voices. But I also, as a person who has not had a lot of agency in my career, I also have had to learn, to trust myself, and to trust my curation and my aesthetic, and believe that there are people who will respond to that, because I've been shouted down enough, and then realized that there were champions of my work, to have learned that lesson the hard way.
It's a great question. Yeah, I'm thinking about like Mixbud in particular. Like we are a social justice organization that uses theater to achieve its missions, right? And so theater, the theater part is secondary. Um, and so it's interesting because like most people think of and experience our company as a theater organization, and they expect that we're going to produce, some thought-provoking plays around social justice issues. And right before I was hired, the board kind of really clarified, like, no, like we are indeed, the primary thing is we are a social justice organization, and that's the first part. And so it's interesting because like this question about like how you bring audience along, like I feel like the questions are I'm checking myself because I'm having this internal conversation about do you make different choices when that lens changes? Like what are the choices you make if you're just trying to deal with social justice? And then what are the choices that you make, or how do you make those choices if you're making theater? And they feel different. I don't know that they really are, because it may just be like I'm just in the position and I haven't had the distance, but it feels different. There's an urgency like to when you think about like social justice work, there's just kind of an urgency that is easy to kind of be pulled towards. And I think our movements are showing us that you also just have to breathe and move deliberately, and but again, like it's hard not to kind of feel that the urgency. And so it really long-winded way of getting to, like I think one of the struggles that I've been having is the kind of work to do, the kind of work that needs to happen. Like it is my personal belief that audiences don't change from watching a play. You will have a profound experience. You can be deeply moved. It is not going to, if we are in fact trying to make social change, that is not an efficient and effective way to go about doing it. And so I have I kind of made some big changes quickly because in my view, we are a social justice organization. And if that is what we're trying, if that is the mission, then how are we employing art and theater to make that happen? And and that's alienated some people. Just about like, how do we want to change? Like, is it radical change or incremental change? And when the board just came down, just was super clear about priorities, that for me was the signal. And I've had the board support of like, actually, we're ready for some more transformational change than incremental. And we're in it. And there's pluses and minuses and, other things. But yeah, great question.
Great. Yeah. I want to uplift a question in the chat, being, can you talk about the shift in funder focus toward social impact and how to express the inherent value of art in the art making that impact?
I'm just going to start, and I'll be shorter. Yeah, I think that's for me the thing that I was talking about is like there's value to what we do beyond the piece itself, beyond the work of art itself, and I feel like this is just a moment for us to kind of find the words to articulate that. And if you look in like the creative placemaking, kind of placemaking, placekeeping kind of worlds, like there's really great language, and there's really great ways to think about like how to do the work and what the benefits are. There's just just came back from that convening in Washington, that around the cross sector work, the bridge and healing, something this third word, and it was like there is definitely a shift has happened. And to see the federal government talking about art not as creative economy, but as like the values of beauty and building community and healing the soul. And these are words coming from military officials and people from the Commerce Department and people from the Department of Health, like that would not have happened 4 years ago, and something has fundamentally shifted. And I think because it takes so much work to make the play, I think all we can see is the play. And can we just give ourselves some space, just look at, oh, like we do this play and these are all the benefits that happen with that play. And it's everything from creating belonging. It's everything from consensus making, from meaning making, like all these things that we offer that we can do.
I don't know that I have a great answer to this question, but I think along the lines of what Mark is saying, that there are so many more aspects to what we're doing than just the play, and that highlighting those is a key in, if that's the kind of funding that's being pursued, that's the key. How are you, what is the process of creating this work? What is the end goal beyond the end of the evening? I like to say that art is not the action, art is the call to action. So what is the action that you're calling for, if you are calling for it? And then where's your data? Do you have, that's what can make the case, or break it if you have it, but you can't build it without the doing.
I agree with both Mark and Lance, and also not sure I have a great answer for the question. I think what we've been holding ourselves accountable to is, going back to our core values and really asking ourselves, what are the ways in which are we truly living these out? And if so, what are the ways we are living these out? And if not, what's our pathway to this? And sort of holding ourselves accountable to, hey, we've been relying on some old data, and we've been sharing that data as like, look how great we are doing, and like, wow, but that data is also over 10 years old. And so I think we've sort of been holding a mirror up to our own selves organizationally, in this transition, which makes it really hard, right, to say, oh, that's actually is true, but true from a time before. And so how are we reflecting that today? And that can feel really uncomfortable to acknowledge, that that's some old information. But we're also okay with that, to say, yeah, and then look at the spaces we get to lean into, as it relates to how we're showing up, how we're living out our mission, how we're living out our values. And I think that's what's most important to our board, that we stay aligned to those things and live them out in ways maybe that we haven't done before. And I think those are the sort of areas that we're, again, holding ourselves accountable to.
I would also just kind of postscript, just like, I think a lot about civic imagination. And I think like one of the things that is like really, really hurting our country and certainly our communities is our inability to imagine. Pop culture is littered with dystopia, and that's all we can see. And so that's all we can imagine. We have code daydreamt a bleak future, and that's all we're doing now, because we're in that loop. And what we can offer is like the space to imagine beautiful futures, and like what happens when it works. And the great thing is that, like, how do we talk about this impact, right? Like, we imagine worlds, and we literally build those worlds. We put those worlds on our stages and in the parking lots, and in the community rooms, like wherever the work happens. And it's the opportunity to invite people to build those imagination muscles, right? So that we become first responders in a way, so that as housing crisis happens or health crisis happens, like in my dream, like the mayor calls the theater company and says, we've got to address this issue. Help us help us, work across these sectors, find the space so that people can imagine and talk and figure out what these solutions are. I mean, I feel like it's the most exciting moment. And I will just say the work is going to have to change. Like that kind of work looks different than a lot of the work that we produce, that the field produces. And so I think this question now for organizations is like, what is the kind of work that you want to do? And what is the role that you want to play? And so where we started is like, what is the function? What is our function? What is the role of the things that we do? What is our role in our community? These are the really big questions, because it informs how we, the choices we make, what we do.
Maybe, if I may, from Stefan from Chicago. We've been looking a lot in our reorganizing and going from a venue leading, hospitality facilitating to a collaborating and fomenting company that's part of a larger complex of new work organizations. We've really been thinking about two things. One of them being more honest about the event difference between making an event and making a product and the language that goes around that. I agree that our plays need to change, but I also think that our language around particularly the making of new work needs to change, that there's a tendency we found to speak about new work and new plays in particular, sort of in the model of buying properties and staging them. And actually what in the new work field happens is we all know is very different, but we go, oh, don't bother with that. That's what the people need to hear. They need to hear who the artistic and who the managing, who's the money guy and who's the creative. And so we're looking for more honest ways, even where it's strenuous and inconvenient and not good with grantors, to speak more honestly about the event nature, that it isn't a product, and that it isn't only the playwright who walks away with something from a theater event, but that many, many artistic collaborators coming from many sides and many viewpoints contribute to an event, and the way to speak about an event that has never happened before is different. And the other thing really for us is collaborating. This speaks to the funding question that was elevated earlier, is how to take these ideas we have and go less towards product again, where one says there's one way to get new work done in Chicago, in the Midwest or whatever, and rather to speak about stepping stones. We're part of an organization now where there's a young people's festival through one company that goes into high schools. And we want those high school kids, as they're vying to get their play into that festival, to also hear about the NNPN and the NPX, and to see not one, so even the ones who don't win and get in the festival may see another set of stepping stones to bringing their voice and their work to a Rhino Fest where they produce it themselves and try something out, to another one of the many stepping stones, and getting away from the branded one way to do it to the multiple stepping stones for many different people. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. I also want to lift up Rachel's story from the chat. Rachel, do you want to share that story real quick?
Yeah, it was in a community in Georgia, and we were at an advocacy day, and they told the story of a commissioners meeting, and the arts budget was getting cut $1 million. And one by one, they did what everybody does. We stood up, told a story about a child impacted by an arts program, and the police chief walked up in full police chief regalia at the end, because it was the idea was who is giving the message and how is the message best heard. And he stood up and said, listen, if you're going to cut $1 million, take it out of my budget, because if these folks are doing their work, my work is much easier. And that message was heard in a really different way because of who the messenger was. And I just think that's interesting when you're thinking about who is helping tell the story as well toward change.
Thanks, Rachel. I want, we have time for one or two, we'll see more questions. And the one that I really am eager to hear from our panelists on because theater is a collaborative art form, because y'all are part of this network of member theaters, other theaters who have recently gone through leadership transition or maybe thinking about it down the road, what do you wish that other theaters knew, either as potential collaborators with your organization or as they prepare for transitions of their own?
I would say
think
two
one of-
things. No, you go.
Sorry, Mark. I will say I do think the idea of a transition period was a smart idea. I'm not sure we executed it well, partly because the plan of action was created with the board and the previous leadership. So new leadership I wasn't part of that journey, and not that I necessarily had to be, but I do think there should have been some components that I was part of for clarity in terms of paths forward, right? So there just could have been more clarity. I'll just say that. And then I think, in the business world, and I've been saying this from day one, is like, this has been sort of an artistic home for many people, and there's value in keeping it as an artistic home, but there's also value in reminding ourselves that this is also a business. And so how might we embed some of those business practices in ways that we haven't before that will serve us as an organization? And so it sounds sort of tedious, but there was no playbook, right? There's a lot of historical knowledge that went with folks when they left. So there was no sort of, us playbook for how to navigate certain things, or connections or relationships. That sort of all got lost. And so a lot of it did feel like there was, in some spaces, starting from ground zero. So I would encourage, and I think from day one that I've been in this position, I have been saying, how do I set the stage for the person who is coming after me, and what do I think is important to set that stage for that person or persons? That's my 2 cents.
Yes, piggyback, ditto, similar. We're what I would tell people who want to partner with us, we are a 48-year-old startup. We are simultaneously 48 years old and 1.5 years old, and we feel those tensions. And just I think a lot about how to prepare for the person that's going to follow. The person who preceded me was here for 46 years, and everything kind of centered around them, not out of ego, but purely out of longevity. And so, just trying to be very intentional about undoing that part, and just but if it's creating a new system.
I owe for a transition period. What I wouldn't give for a transition period. I am envious also of the idea of a container, of the board saying, we're a social justice organization, we're this, we're that. I came into a theater that I don't know has had a real identity in that way, either under the most recent leader or the one prior. And so I heard a lot of, we're very excited for what you're going to do, and we can't wait to see where this is going. And I said, do you know something that I don't know? Because I don't know where we're going either. I have no container to work in. You're telling me I do anything that I want, but I have to argue for it, right? I have to justify everything that I'm doing. And so the size of my container is so large, and the size of my budget is so small, and the size of human imaginations surrounding me is somewhere between large and small. And and so there's too much there for no transition period, and for no real appetite for radical change. So I think any theater that is looking at a change, to build in that transition period, but to have an idea. You are an organization full of people who are already there, and to have an idea of what you are and what you want to be, and to give your leader a container to work in, I think is very valuable, because then you set people up for success, and you bring the right people in, right? If there's a container that someone doesn't want to work in, or very much wants to work in, and that person can gravitate to or away from that institution.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. We are in our final moments. I'm going to toss to Liana for a lightning round question of our panelists. And then we'll send you off on your merry way. Liana, bring us home.
Thanks, Anne. Three of our panelists are going to think of 3 words or a 3-word phrase to kind of encompass this imagination space, this understanding that like time is needed in this transition, and thinking about the future. So what are 3 words that you are most excited about as you think about the future of your companies? And we will all think about that for ourselves as we leave. Kick it off to the panelists.
I don't have 3 words. I have 2. It's been my North Star. It remains my North Star. Radical imagination.
Relevant, truthful, honest.
Community builds capacity.
Amazing. I'm going to carry all 8 of those words with me into the rest of my day. Thank you. And thank you to our panelists again for everything else that they've offered as well. Join us in 2 weeks for our pitch session. It's season planning time. Don't you want to do a rolling world premiere? I think you do. And of course, register for Showcase. Hope to see y'all in Queens in April. Thanks, y'all. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.